Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is the show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can influence our lives in better ways. Technology is a force multiplier, so it's going to be out there either helping us or hurting us, so might as well learn about it and make it help us. I'm going to lead off the show, as I like to do, with a little Creative Commons content to kick the discussion off here. And this is from the good folks at twit.tv from Tech News Today 1450, Robot Voices and the Uncanny Valley.
All right, just in time for Valentine's Day over the weekend, John Markoff, New York Times reporter and author of Machines of Loving Grace, wrote about the search for a computer voice that people would actually like. Joining us to talk about the voices of our machines and devices is John Markoff with his real non-computerized voice. Welcome, John.
Hi, you guys.
So you write that it's not yet possible to create a computerized voice that's indistinguishable from a human voice for anything longer than the short phrases in our GPS. Why is that?
Technically, it's hard. It's challenging because of particularly a subfield within the world of artificial intelligence and speech synthesis, which is referred to as prosody, the ability to capture inflection and emotion in a human voice. And that's sort of the thing that gives us as humans the cues to understand that we're speaking to another human and not a robot. And progress has been made, and I simply started with the simple question, is there an uncanny valley for speech in the same way there's an uncanny valley for graphics, animated features? I think the term was actually coined by a Japanese researcher and scientist in the 1970s, and the idea was that as you get more and more real with computer animation, you reach this spot or this quality that looks creepy. The eyes don't work right, the face doesn't work right, and you have to get through that uncanny valley before you can be absolutely realistic. And the animation guys are getting there, and I wondered what the speech guys were doing.
This reminds me of when I was younger. One of my favorite video games was a game called Zork, and it was one of the really, really early examples, at least in the arcades growing up, of synthesized speech. And I remember thinking, and you never necessarily thought that it sounded like a human. At that point, I think you were just amazed that it was saying anything and that it was a robot and it was talking in your language. But I wonder if then we would hear what, let's say Google, Google Now puts out when I ask it to give me directions somewhere. I wonder if we would hear then what we hear now and think it sounds like a human, just based on the sheer fact that it's so advanced. But sometimes, like I listen and I talk, I use it all the time on my device. And it's this like the monotone inflection aspect of it. It's kind of there. It's come so far, but you just want a little bit of variation, a little bit of variability in where it's kind of hitting its inflection points, and it always seems to kind of deliver at the same kind of flat line.
Jason, if you're going to go back to Zork, you probably remember a game company called Infocom in the early 80s, a text adventure games.
Gorf, yeah.
It was and Zork, right? Was it Zork?
So Zork was the I get it mixed up, and Creamy Corn Cob actually corrected me here. I get Zork and Gorf always mixed up, but yes, same era entirely. Sorry about that.
Infocom was a Boston-based text adventure game company that had the slogan that was "the best graphics are in your head."
Yeah,
and that was true for me for the longest time. It was why I would go out and buy every new video game machine to see how close they were getting to, the best graphics not being in my head. And I think somewhere between the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, we crossed over, and the best graphics are no longer in my head.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So that begs the question. I mean, like, is my Amazon Echo like a better assistant than, or a better member of the family than an actual member of my family? I mean, what happens when, because I find her voice to be almost, it's a little silly, and I like it. I don't want it to be any more human. I guess what I'm saying is I don't want her to replace me as the mother of my children anytime soon. So talk a little bit about what we expect from devices once their voices get better.
Well, so the question is, will you be able to cross over? And you know, from talking to speech researchers, I think it's not going to happen anytime immediately, but we probably will at some point be able to make machines that you as a human can't tell you're not talking to a machine after an extent. I mean, it's kind of a Turing test like question. I mean, for me, the obvious thing is that these technologies will be obviously misused like every other computer technology. And what happens the first time your mother calls you and she tells you she forgot her password, and when you tell her what it is, except it's not your mother, it's a machine that sounds like your mother. I'm sure that kind of stuff will happen. You know, this is inevitable, right? There's also the trust question. I mean, most of the people I spoke to said that the Amazon Echo right now is one of the best, or not, if not the best, example of synthesized speech and getting close to human qualities. And so you run into all the issues that were raised in the movie Her. With Samantha, the operating system, and you know, should you trust that machine? That machine is not a human, even though it sounds like a human. And should you interact with it like it is a human? I wrote a couple months ago about a Microsoft experiment in China called Xiaoice, which is a chatbot. And Xiaoice now has the voice of a 16-year-old girl. And unlike the IBM folks who designed Watson to have a particular kind of voice, Xiaoice is a different experiment with Microsoft, and it's intended to have this conversational quality. And it has 20 million followers, 10 million intensive followers. 25% of them have said they have typed "I love you" to Xiaoice. You run into lots of issues beyond just speech.
So what about, I mean, how close are we to Her or to like Ex Machina, like, you know, Eve actually, you know, having the voice that sounds human?
Yes. Well, so you're interacting with Amazon Echo, and right now for very small snippets, for short conversations, it kind of works. I mean, you're already slightly worried about your children. But what I found when I was in China recently, and I actually saw a longer demonstration of Xiaoice, and I was kind of surprised that it ended up being more like a Potemkin village than I thought it would be. From having talked to people, I thought it was going to be more compelling. That when I actually saw the demonstration, I was a little disappointed. It was much more scripted, and you know, in terms of passing the Turing test and being a real companion, I think it probably works better for teenagers than adults right now. But you know, where I think these things are going to come increasingly for most commercial interactions, you know, we're going to be dealing with proxies for humans, whether it's, you know, chat bots or FAQ bots or, you know, technical support lines. Increasingly, there will be machine voices on the other side of the conversation.
Do we still need this uncanny valley? Like, is that something that the people creating these devices, creating these voices, are they still sort of building that in because we know that we still need it?
Well, I talked to a range of the designers. And so IBM, in designing Watson, was looking for a particular effect. And they actually did not want their system to be too human, but they wanted it to be trustable. And they were looking for a particular effect, and they found it. But then on the other hand, I spoke with the designers at an Israeli company called Imperson, and they're really, you know, looking for ways to build avatars for politicians. So you could have a Donald Trump bot, or you know, a Cruz bot or a Rubio bot that would be on Facebook, and that anybody would be able to chat with the politician, and it would sound like the politician. And or a celebrity. Name your celebrity. Any celebrity who wants to have a presence on Facebook or in social media could have a ultimately visual, but pretty soon a spoken presence to allow people to interact with them. That's just a step away.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. Machines of Loving Grace was an amazing book. I read it last fall. It's still available. You can also listen to it, have your Amazon Echo read it to you. She will not read it to you in her normal voice. It's an excellent reader. I highly recommend it. John Markoff is a senior writer for the New York Times Science section and author of Machines of Loving Grace, The Quest for Common Ground Between Humans and Robots. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ, and that was Tech News Today, Creative Commons content from twit.tv, the Uncanny Valley of Voices. So interesting variation there. Actually, the idea of using the robot voices to impersonate people, that actually, to a certain degree, has been done. If you look at these supercuts of some song, like there was Lionel Richie's "Hello," I think, done with clips from movies. So they had just had all the lyrics extracted from various lines of dialogue from different movies. So, and you had the visual going with each word, so the picture was flashing around very quickly. And there was also one with a newscaster doing a rap where they did the same thing and then threw a little auto tune on top of the hand-picked words. And Siskel and Ebert. Ebert, famously lost his jaw and his voice, and because he had so much audio of him recorded from doing the Siskel and Ebert at the movies thing, movie reviews, that some technicians were able to put together he already had a synthetic voice, but was very robot-y, and they were able to make a synthetic voice for him that was actually made from his own voice, so he could talk in his own voice again, which was really, as you can imagine, was a pretty emotional experience for him. But there's nothing to stop you from doing that on behalf of someone else. So it's that would be a bit of a fine art, but I guess it's going to go from, hey, don't leave me any passwords on voicemail or text or anything like this, and you can't do it unless it's like a video call. And then even then, I've seen some research where they took the mouth from one person speaking and mapped it onto another person. And so they were actually able to mouth sync someone saying things they didn't actually say, and that they even had computer animated teeth and everything, so to make it a little more convincing, and otherwise they stretched the face in ways that were pretty realistic. So in theory, if you're using that technology, even a Skype call wouldn't be sufficient. You'd really need to have somebody there in person, or this is another thing where it's kind of coming back to, we need strong crypto. If you have a strong crypto end-to-end, as so reviled by the FBI, because it's going dark, if they can't peep in on every conversation for, very, like fractions of a penny, the world's going to end. But that was information they only recently got. They fought crime just fine before. And, people exist in the real world, so as long as you know where their body is, you can still, tap them in person. You don't have to have a weak infrastructure, and actually, when you weaken your infrastructure so that no one has security, then no one has security against criminals either. So that's a much bigger problem than not being able to wiretap everybody simultaneously for free. Just another reason why, we have to use the positive individual strengthening technologies, in some kind of balance with the amount of amplification of ability that is being put in the hands of the criminal element. Just yesterday, I was hearing about, my favorite tech podcaster, Steve Gibson. His lifestyle business there, selling his SpinRite stuff, has been kind of shut down for now because someone decided to launch a denial of service attack on him. And it's it's not a particularly sophisticated attack. You could learn in a fairly brief amount of time how to do it. You just use some prepackaged tools from the right forums, and boom, you can pretty much knock any small volume site off the net. And that wouldn't happen if you'd said, hey, I'm only doing authenticated connections, and I need to know who I'm connecting to, and I have some control over the connections coming in. It's like, say, hey, I don't want DNS queries from all over the net. I don't want responses because they're fake responses. It's kind of like sending out postcards and putting someone else's return address on the envelope, and They do that all over the world, and the responses are much larger than the requests, so they're able to amplify their attack doing that. And all these DNS replies, so-called replies, are converging on the target site and completely stuffing their internet capacity. And so they had to unplug. Their provider said, well, too much trouble for us, bye. Now, there's lots of people with big pipes that can defend against those things for, quote, the right price. And he's a pretty beloved figure, so I think he'll be back on the net pretty soon. But still, saying that, you don't need to put powerful tools in the hands of individuals, I think you do. They need to be able to defend themselves against things like this. To me, actually, internet freedom, and freedom of encryption, freedom to use your own tools and have control over the devices in your possession, much more important right than owning a gun at this point, because the amount of threats you face from guns is pretty, where having a gun would help you, pretty low. The amount of situations where having a secure computer would help you, huge. So it kind of, if your computer is secure enough, it takes things back into the realm where people have to physically come to your house, and to steal from you. They can't do it from, they can't do it remotely from some foreign country that has no extradition treaty, and therefore is pretty much a risk-free crime. And you don't want risk-free crime to be practical and easy for people to do, especially where there's a lot of poverty. So that's a long way around for the uncanny voice implications. But I'll just add in that I did notice that when I upgraded to the newer voice on the iPad, I noticed it breathed before certain words, and it always had a breath in the same way. So it did give that effect. And once I started noticing it, it was kind of hard to not notice it. It was actually kind of distracting. So I kind of wished the breathing had a volume control, but it does not. So anyway, on to a little bit more fun tech, which of course every tech has capabilities for abuse, but assuming this is under your control, it's pretty cool. This is from the good folks, Creative Commons content from twit.tv, and it's specifically from the show This Week in Computer Hardware 328. And they're talking about eye tracking of a product called Tobai.
MSI releases GT72S G Tobii, spelled with two I's, G-Sync laptop with eye tracking technology. Announced a long time ago at Computex. Sebastian has the write-up on this at PC Per. Not only includes NVIDIA G-Sync, but eye tracking technology that promises a more immersive gameplay experience. MSI is calling it the world's most advanced gaming laptop. The idea is that you'll be able to switch targets in a game, select objects on the floor, basically activate or interact with the game by simply focusing or looking away at the screen. Available now, going to be bundled with Tom Clancy's The Division, and, quote, currently supports a variety of gaming titles, including Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Assassin's Creed Rogue, Arma 3, Elite Dangerous, and more. You got to play around with it at CES. Did you feel that the eye tracking system was an advantage in gameplay? I mean, this is a $2,600 laptop. It's a nice laptop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's badass. 1 terabyte. Well, actually, SSD. It's funny. It's 2 drives, 256 gigabyte SSD, and a 1 terabyte HDD, a Blu-ray burner, killer networking, 32 gigs of memory, a GTX 980M, a Core i7 6820HK, a 17-inch 1080p screen, and that Tobii eye tracking. Tobii eye tracking works. I've got the chance to play with it. I've never really played with it in a real game, not a demo game.
Right. So, I mean, I spent maybe 15 minutes with it at CES this year, and it worked way better than I expected it to. So the demo they had running there was on Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and the gameplay loop was, hey, there's a significant portion of the game where you have like a tether that you can throw across from one building to the other, and traverse across the gap that way. Normally when you're aiming that that grappling hook, if you will, across it. You have to move your thumbstick around and kind of, it's a third-person game, so wherever the guy kind of looks, you can kind of figure out what attachment point at the other building it would have. With the eye tracking implementation, it actually uses your eyes to select the location. You hit the button on the controller or your keyboard or whatever to actually fire it, and it worked very well. It worked very quickly. There was not a perceivable lag behind it, and it was pretty cool. Now, I didn't play enough of it to know, like, is this a big advantage for gameplay, or is this kind of like a little tricky thing that they were able to use as a demo? The other thing that they did in this game was, I think it'll show up here in this video in just a second, is that they basically used your eye location to do high dynamic range. So if you see the screen, it's changing brightness. That's not like a camera problem. That's not the game screwing up. It's basically tracking my eyes. So if I look at the bright spot on the right-hand side of the screen, it will come into the correct dynamic range, and the dark area would kind of fade out. If I'm looking at the dark spots, the dark area where the roof is, it will come into, and it kind of blows out the area on the outside. And it was very fast. It responded very quickly. Like I said, it wasn't laggy. It didn't seem like it was going to slow me down. You could see this being used for games that have depth of field, right? Like, depth of field in games has always been a kind of a dumb thing, in my opinion, because they basically use depth of field to try to get you to look at the thing they want you to look at, as opposed to responding to what you're actually looking at. With this technology, they could do that, right? They could put whatever you're not looking at out of focus more if they wanted to do that for some, whatever gameplay reason they wanted to do. So I thought it worked really well. The price of the MSI laptop is high for sure, but keep in mind that it is a high-end gaming laptop hardware regardless, and they're just kind of adding this feature in. So I don't really know what the markup is for this particular, for the Tobii eye tracking stuff integrated to it. But there's obviously some, it's probably $100 or $200 or something like that. The Tobii eye tracking stuff, they actually sell a camera for it that you can put on your monitor or on your PC at home, right? So if you want to have the eye tracking capability, but you don't, this is one laptop that has it, obviously they need a bigger audience than that. So there's essentially like a webcam type thing that has IR cameras and then IR lights that, they're shining into your eyes, and then they're reading the reflections back, essentially, is how the technology works. And then if you read in that post, there are other games that have support for it. Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Assassin's Creed Rogue, Arma 3, Elite Dangerous, and the new Tom Clancy's The Division, which I think is coming out this month or March, will all have support for Tobii eye tracking tech in there. And I think this game might ship with The Division. I think it includes a copy of The Division as well. But I've asked for one of these to review. I want to try out like the idea of Elite Dangerous with eye tracking technology sounds really, really, really cool, right? Like kind of a arcade sim, or not arcade sim, but like a flight sim, space sim game with eye tracking tech. Sounds like it has a lot of potential to be useful and fun. So I definitely want to try that out. I don't know what the long term, the tail of this tech is, with VR and AR kind of getting all the attention right now. But I have a feeling it's going to be more interesting than people kind of expected. It's pretty easy to be to write this off as just another gimmick. But if they do it well and they integrate it with games that use it right, it could be pretty interesting.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ Turner. And that was This Week in Computer Hardware 328 from the good folks at twit.tv, talking a little bit about eye tracking. So, every time we get some technology that is monitoring us to give a better response, of course, we're going to think about the downside. If you have this working with software that is not under your control, then it could be doing all sorts of behavioral monitoring, like famously several TV sets or Nielsen boxes have started to incorporate face detection stuff into them so they can actually tell if the TV is merely on or if someone is watching it, and in one case they had like 6 sort of standardized expressions that it divided up all expressions into, and it would give some sort of feedback on was the person happy, unhappy, scared, bored. I don't remember the exact emoticons that they were basically breaking this down into, but it was it was potentially pretty creepy if they're if someone is monitoring both what you're seeing and the emotions you have to them. But again, a computer attached to, or a sensor like this attached to a computer that is under your control, that it's not it's not running sneaky software that you didn't authorize, it could be pretty powerful. There's a lot of things going on in games and computer interfaces in general that could be really accelerated by being able to monitor where you're looking, because these are fairly accurate. So they have been able to do things like for people that were disabled, have them move icons around and move a cursor in a word processor and such based on where they were looking, and then they could type by blinking. And in some cases they have little EKG sensors on your head to actually allow you to think letters that you want to do. And I know at least one movie had this in it. It was one where they had the super stealth fighter, and it was firing missiles and stuff based on what the person that was piloting it was thinking. In that case, I think you had to think the fire command in Russian or something for it to work. But yeah, anyway, interesting stuff. So start thinking about it now, because it is coming down the pipe. It's not going to be common at first, but as always, this tech only gets cheaper. There have been phones that have Face ID and supposedly monitoring of where your eyes are. Not real common, but there's a couple of specialty phones that have done that. So it is coming. Well, the next piece I wanted to play was again from Twit.tv. Love these guys because they turn out all this great Creative Commons non-commercial attribution material. And this is from This Week in Law 326, and talking about trademarks and hashtags. Check it out.
So obviously lots of words can be trademarks. Trademarks are used in a certain area of commerce by certain companies that register them. And if you're in a different area of commerce, you may well be able to register a trademark that has already been registered by somebody else. It just, you're trying not to confuse the public and consumers. So when you throw hashtags into the mix, things get interesting. Can you tell us a bit about this, Reg?
So the hashtag, the Twitter, pound symbol. Mm-hmm. Everybody uses it. Everybody who tweets uses it. Everybody who Instagrams uses it like, whoa. Tumblr also has it. And recently, people have been applying for trademarks in it, which is just totally bizarre to me because hashtags are sort of by nature ephemeral, right? I used a hashtag yesterday, KSK, that was really only relevant yesterday. And today, maybe somebody else will use it for something different. And the nature of hashtags being so ephemeral, the fact that people even want to trademark this is just absolutely baffling to me. Mm-hmm. And I put it right up there with Taylor Swift trying to trademark This Sick Beat. I don't even know what people are thinking.
All right. So can you give us some concrete examples of things that are not yet a trademark, but have been given life in the hashtag arena and someone has trotted down to the USPTO?
I think this was the blurred lines case that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the BuzzFeed article, and blurred lines is 2 words in trademark, as far as I know, and they combined it and threw a hashtag on it and have applied for it. I don't believe, though, that it has been granted yet. Am I wrong in that?
I'm not following it, so I'm not sure.
this is, I'm just looking at it from, right, exactly. I don't believe that it's been granted yet. It's difficult to convince the Patent and Trademark Office to grant a patent for even domain names. Certainly, you're not allowed to patent a top-level domain. So I don't think any of these are going to pass muster. And with the length of time that's required to get a trademark on it in the first place, I don't think it's going to be successful for anyone at all.
All right. Emery, any thoughts?
I don't have great expertise in trademarks, so I'm going to avoid saying anything and putting my foot in my mouth. But it just seemed, from my cursory understanding of trademark, that this would be the kind of thing that businesses would jump at. Informing consumer expectations. I would think that McDonald's would be all about trademarking hashtag I'm loving it or something like that. But I think that the overzealously trademarking things is never a good idea.
Right. And I'd also say, I'm loving it is also just a phrase that people might use. And you might say it in a tweet ironically and say, I'm having breakfast at my mom's, hashtag I'm loving it. And I don't think anyone thinks that that's an endorsement of McDonald's or even an incorrect use of the trademark if it were a trademark.
Yeah, it seems to me like there actually needs to be some clarification from the USPTO as to when it's going to be okay or if it's going to be okay to trademark a hashtag, because trademarks traditionally have been used to identify a business, and by definition, a hashtag is used to further a conversation in whatever forum that it's being used in, Reg. As you mentioned, all of the various ones where you're likely to see.
Well, I think hashtags are used to signal something. They're used to signal expectation, signal, cue in a reader that there is a larger dialogue going on related to, whatever they're hashtagging. So I don't know.
Right. They can't be,
what I'm curious is why would they trademark something? What would be the redressability?
To suggest that there might be a conversation around something that actually there is not one around, but is just funny to throw into your post.
Well, right. And sometimes I will throw in a really long and obnoxious hashtag as a joke, right? So hashtag I'm having breakfast at my mom's. Because Instagram and Tumblr actually support hashtags with spaces in them. So you can have a hashtag on Instagram and Tumblr. Actually, maybe it's only Tumblr that supports it. But you can have a tag. Back when we blogged, right? These were just called tags to categorize your post. And it can be multiple words. It can have a space in it. So Tumblr and Instagram are notorious for having these really long hashtags. Twitter, you don't get them as long because you are limited to 140 characters in total. So when you see a really long hashtag in Twitter, it's more of it's for comedic effect. But I don't really think that these are trademarkable as for the points that you brought up, Denise, because it's not really distinguishing a business. If anything, it's distinguishing a particular advertising, a marketing plan of the business, right? It's not hashtag McDonald's, it's hashtag I'm loving it. Those are two different things.
Right. Tiffany, anything for us on this?
Sure. I think that first we should recognize the genius of Alexandra J. Roberts' BuzzFeed article. I love seeing complicated legal issues written about primarily using GIFs. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's a very new concept, right? This trademarks of hashtags. So I think this is a very novel way to introduce the topic to an audience that probably doesn't want to read a law review article. By the way, though, I am attending the Works in Progress IP conference at the University of Washington next week. And the the one works in progress that I'm most excited to hear about is actually the law review article Alexandra J. Roberts is writing on this topic. So I'm sure that this is going to actually be a concrete legal analysis. But for now, the BuzzFeed version is also good. And it's interesting. Honestly, I don't know if it's going to be an issue that we look to in maybe 5 years. I think we're already seeing that younger people, the kids and teens these days, aren't really using hashtags as much as they used to. So if they are the future of the internet, then the future of the internet might not need trademarks for hashtags.
It might not. Emery, were you serious before the show that you were not aware that BuzzFeed's format was pretty much headlines and GIFs?
I mean, I knew the reputation, but I didn't think that literally the format of their article is headline GIF, headline GIF, headline GIF, like byline. Like that's it. That's literally the entire thing. And I've got to say, Tiffany, you have cast it in a much better light than I initially had when I saw the article. But I can get behind what you're saying. We do need, if this is how you educate lay people about, complex legal issues, I guess this works.
Yep. I can get behind it, I think. I can also get behind it as Drake's next song. Instead of Hotline Bling, headline GIF. Why not?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess one question I had about this to hopefully to our other guests that are more knowledgeable about trademarks than I am, but when we get down to it, I don't really understand why you would want to trademark a hashtag. I guess what would be the redress ability if you the situation would be that someone would trademark Deflategate, and then whoever owns that trademark could then send takedowns to people that use that hashtag. What?
Right, that's the other part of this that is absolutely baffling to me. If McDonald's trademarks hashtag I'm loving it, and I don't know why I'm fixated on that one, that means that I cannot tweet it. So I cannot go to McDonald's and say...
Undermines the whole purpose of the hashtag.
Right, I am enjoying my Big Mac. Hashtag I'm loving it. That would be an infringement because I am not authorized to use the trademark. If I am authorized to use the trademark, then it's not a trademark. So this whole thing is just, I feel like some lawyers got their hands on something and decided to run with it and just don't understand the technology, honestly, because it's ephemeral. It's supposed to signify a conversation, and it's supposed to encourage additional conversation about that thing. And if you trademark it, it's no longer ephemeral, and it shuts down the conversation because you limit who can speak about it, who can use the word. And
you're listening to Northwest Tech Show. That was some Creative Commons content from the good folks at twit.tv. That was from This Week in Law 336. Thanks, guys. So, I was kind of relieved to hear them make kind of reference to, in general, you don't trademark domains, because that was one of the things I was kind of concerned about was, shoot, is it enough to register a domain? Do you have to also trademark it so no one can, kind of have a backdoor takeover, where they trademark your name and then use that to use domain resolution rules to take you out as a quote unquote squatter, even though you had it first. So, it's when you are really trying to brand a product outside the context of just simply, for owning a domain. If you own the domain, you own the domain. So, it would be very, apparently it's not practical under the law to just come in and say, oh yeah, this domain's been registered since the 90s, but, I registered this trademark yesterday and I'm taking it over. So apparently you cannot do that, which is a relief. I'm all for simplifying systems and, letting people, do what they, do things that are obvious, right? If you register a domain name, it should be obvious that you intend to use it, and it shouldn't be able to take away from you without that. So, but yeah, it was interesting. I guess people are kind of in the habit when they just when you got a hammer, everything, when you got a, what was it saying? If all you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, if trademark copyright and all this are in your tool belt, and that's you can kind of want to use it on everything. And yeah, as I discussed, it's a little bit nonsensical in something the whole point of is for other people to use it to trademark it, unless you just want to shut the conversation down, and that's not really what trademarks are for. So now into a little more fun science story. We recently had some breakthroughs. One of the last thought experiments of Einstein, one of their last predictions of his theory of relativity and special relativity, is that there were these things called gravity waves. So let's hear a little bit about that from the good folks at twit.tv. Tech News Today, 1448.
Joining us to talk about the discovery of gravitational waves is Rhett Allain from Wired. Welcome, Rhett.
Hi, thank you.
It's great to have you
Glad
here.
to be here.
So first of all, I want to start off with an audio clip. This is basically the foundation of the discovery that we're going to talk about today. Can you play that? All right, so there you go. Those chirps you hear are the sound of two black holes colliding more than 1 billion light years away. Rhett, explain to us why this is such a significant piece of audio.
Because it shows the direct measurement of a gravitational wave. Einstein predicted that there would be gravitational waves, but you just can't detect them. I mean, we've had evidence that they exist before, but we never detect them directly. So this oscillation chirp thing that you hear is due to these two black holes spiraling into each other is very significant. I mean, it's a new way to do astronomy. It's like we can look at things and now we can also detect them with gravitational waves. It's really cool.
And ultimately listen to them. So like you said, Einstein first imagined the existence of gravitational waves literally like a century ago in 1915 to the month. So this was 100 years ago, basically. Who's responsible for this particular discovery now, and how long have they been working to kind of seek out this evidence?
The gravitational wave thing is, I mean, it's been going on for a long time. You know, we're talking 1970s, they started looking for these things. They started to come up with ideas of how could we detect them. You know, Einstein said they should be there, but how do we detect it? Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it's a really amazing story because you come up with different ideas, different strategies for detecting these gravitational waves. They're tiny, tiny, tiny fluctuations in space-time, so they're not easy to detect. And in fact, that's why we need something like a massive event of colliding black holes to even have a signal that's detectable. I mean, there's lots of things that would make signals, but you just can't detect them. So, you know, starting from 1970, coming up with different ideas, thinking about what events would even be able to make a detectable gravitational wave. How often do those events happen? You know, these are things that nobody knows. So you really flying blind here.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. And that was Tech News Today, 1448 from twit.tv. And one thing they kind of left out there was, you know, how did they detect this? So as far as I could tell from the illustration that was kind of going along with the story, looks like they had two lasers shooting down very long chambers at a right angle to each other, and they were set so that their interference pattern was synced up. So like when one was going up, the other one was going down, and when the space and the actual space is compressed so that it for just a fraction of a moment, the one of the lasers is closer to the join of the L than the other one is, then their laser frequencies are going to be out of phase, and all of a sudden they're going to be more in sync, and you'll get a spike instead of them canceling each other out. So interesting concept there, and it's just kind of wild to think that, you know, space is being compressed. And that's you know, two black holes spinning around each other, consuming each other, you know, or merging. And that was, you know, 1.3 billion years ago, because it's 1.3 billion light years away where this is supposed to have you know, been happening. So, you know, what we see through telescopes and what we experience with gravity waves are kind of synced up in that sense. And so these are really, really, really small changes, and it's kind of challenging science just to get something together that's capable of measuring it. Yeah, so just a reminder, science works. You take something that's virtually impossible and you just keep working on the problem until you figure out a way to, to confirm this last hypothesis of Einstein. All right, one more piece and then we're out of here. This is from Tech News Today 1449, of course, from twit.tv, and talking a little bit about the effect of Snapchat has in the current election cycle.
Today, we were reminded again that a large part of the presidential election in the United States is happening on Snapchat while us old people are not watching. It's happening for a lot of first-time voters, especially. The New York Times reports that Snapchat's Iowa caucus geo-filters were seen by more than 6 million users. And in case you're not on Snapchat or you didn't watch our episode a few weeks ago where a real live millennial had to teach me what a geofilter was. By the way, it's an overlay for a picture. It gets pulled in from where you are. So there was one for Petaluma that will, have a picture that you take in Petaluma and it has Petaluma in a Petaluman font.
Oh, okay.
In this case, it was for the Iowa caucuses. So, Georgia, I know that you're in Canada. Has Snapchat swept up the political process in Canada as it has here?
Well, I don't know about snapping up the political process, but I do think that it's a wonderful way to get kids and the younger generation involved in politics, because politics is slightly dull. And so it could be dull. Your politics are actually much more exciting than Canadian politics. There's not much to snap on for Canadian politics. But what I love about it is that how do you get people involved? It's use the mediums that they are comfortable with. And so I love that people get to take their own Snapchats, get the tweet them out. I was going to say snap them out. I don't know, Snapchat them out.
Snap them. Yeah, I think it's snap. I think that's what the kids are calling it.
And so I think that that's a great way to get people involved in politics early.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, they have this loyal, so it's this kind of a politics story and kind of a news story. I mean, they have 100 million users, mostly teenagers and millennials, and that's loyal and active users.
KMUZ Turner.
Love Snapchat. They're on all day.
It's not that they're on every day. It's that they're on all day, every day. It's from some of the kind of accounts that I've read and everything. It's kind of crazy.
And I think it has features, and I'd love to talk to you about this, Georgia. It has features that kids love, like the disappearing photos especially, which as parents we all were like, oh, no, that's scary, which it can be a little bit scary. But, just the fact that they don't want to hoard all these pictures. They don't want to have to see exactly they don't want to look beautiful in every picture because it's going to be there forever. I mean, I think there's some things to love about Snapchat. What do you think?
I do. I think that it gives a little bit more thought to privacy, and there's definitely loopholes to that. But I also like the fact that it's just that quick, easy. It gives kids like little bites of information which are easy to digest, and it allows them to be, a part of the process with that, because it's not going to be something that's overwhelming. When you look on TV about the way that politics are covered, there's pundits, they're talking, really verbosely about very, complex social matters, and they just go on about it. And so this is a nice way. It brings them to them in small little wrapped packages, and then they can make them funny, make them enjoyable. They can put down all kinds of filters and make it fun again.
Yeah, what this talks about to a large degree is like in these areas, let's say around a particular event, all of these snaps are being added, and essentially they get grouped up, out of the giant pool of snaps, end up getting grouped up into a single live story that might have multiples in there, all maybe lasting 10 seconds, at the very most. But it's kind of interesting because it brings you into the event in a different way. So, for example, you might be watching on TV, you might be watching the coverage of these events, and then they go to a commercial break. Well, hey, what do you know? The people that are there snapping and adding to these live stories, they're covering even when the big cameras are off, so they catch these really interesting kind of side, events happening. And it's more like citizen journalism than it is, just like random social network conversation. But I do wonder how much of that is substance. You know what I mean? Because it is such short pieces of information, short bits. I don't know really how deep you go if this is used as like a political tool into the actual nuts and bolts of what's being covered. It's more like coverage of the event for the event's sake, as opposed to really getting in there and informing you about the views of this candidate versus the views of that candidate. But maybe that's the point, right? Get them active, get maybe potentially non-voters active and interested in some way on the platform, and then maybe if that sparks their interest, they investigate further outside of it.
Yeah, it's like the gateway drug to social media and politics.
Yeah, and in these shows, we've talked about the Good Luck America, the Peter Hamby show.
Right.
He's a former CNN reporter, and those are all supported by advertising as well. I mean, for advertisers and for politicians, Snapchat is a great place for them. For people, I mean, for kids and anyone who's on Snapchat, the other thing I like about it, it doesn't revolve around favorites and likes like the rest of social media does, which I think is really different. And I think that is the younger generation just pushing back on that a little bit. I mean, you can see who looks at your story and you can see who doesn't look at your story, but it's not the same as Facebook or Twitter where we're all just like, how many likes am I going to get? How many favorites am I going to get? And I really like that aspect.
Yeah, it's curated in a certain way, like at least the people that you care about follow, and at least everything that RTD Kara tells us about Snapchat. It really does seem like you're really setting it up around the people that you actually really care about in kind of a different way. I will say that suddenly Snapchat's coming up more and more. I'm hopping in there because the filters are so much fun. And you were playing around with it earlier. I'm like, oh man, the grown-ups are in there now. The kids, this is the beginning of the end essentially. The kids are going to flock somewhere else.
We're gonna ruin the play park.
We're getting too interested at this point.
Yeah.
We're too interested.
It's true.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show from KMUZ, and that was Tech News Today 1449 from twit.tv. All right, well, that about wraps up our talks today. I know we had some signal problems for some people. We talked about uncanny voice, eye tracking, hashtags in trademarks, gravity waves, and of course Snapchat and the vote. And I'll have a link next week to where you can see the video of this episode online. But until then, I hope you'll join us to continue this conversation every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock on Northwest Tech Show.